changing landscape of politics across the UK, and the front page...
redrawing of the map, really, of the last few days. I mean, how do Labour respond to this absolute drubbing from the local election results on Thursday? And it's interesting, isn't it, to see the Labour and the Conservatives trying to work out, and sort of, you know, various people saying various things about how they respond to this, the reform quake. And obviously, it's local elections, but it's the first chance people have really had to say, you know, to respond. Well, firstly, we've seen the polls, we've seen the results in the polls, but also, you know, what are people thinking about the new Labour administration? They're not in a good place. And both parties are trying to work out how they respond to the reform quake, that, as Nigel Farage calls it.
And that's the thing, yeah.
And trying to resist the pressure, sorry, Gemma,
no, yeah.
to sort of chase the popularity, to move to the right, as Reform have done, and specifically on immigration. But you were saying.
Yeah, and it was certainly sizable, what they achieved, absolutely. They've got huge financial backing now. But the problem is, for me, is that, yes, Nigel Farage gets quoted on every single word that comes out of his mouth, seems to make front-page news. Nobody goes to the Lib Dems, nobody really tends to go to the Greens, who actually also made, you know, really big inroads and had great results. And yet that sort of seems to get discounted. And so, yes, Labour need to think very hard. I mean, there's a long time in a political calendar before the next general election, but what we're not hearing from Labour is that real vision. And personally, I think you look at Canada, you look at Australia, and you know, perhaps there's room for real progression here. Let's tackle inequality. Let's tackle it is the economy that is at the heart of all of this. But also, we always go back to immigration, and this bleeds quite nicely into what's on the front page of the Times, and the fact that Labour are trying to align more closely with the EU in terms of accessing their crime and illegal migration databases. And at the moment, the EU are a bit like, no, like, why should you have that privilege? You are not part of the EU anymore. Farage is the one that took us, essentially. He was a very, very big proponent of Brexit. Of course, you still sort of associate him with that. Also, big backer of Trump, which he's gone very quiet on recently. And the fact of the matter is, the irony is, the loss of EU cooperation has really stuffed us in terms of migration and not helped at all. It got rid of the Dublin regulation, which allowed the UK to return asylum seekers to the first country that they came from. So it really is quite exhausting, and Labour need to be much louder on these things, I think.
Further thoughts?
Well, yeah, I mean, we keep hearing from Labour that they're going to respond. I mean, my concern was Starmer's response to the local elections. Our Prime Minister's response was, we hear what you say, he said, I get it. We're going to go further and faster. So his response to an absolute, you know, really, really bad night and day and night at the polls was, we're going to give you more of the same, but even more so. People, former Labour voters, were absolutely astonished at that. Starmer needs some, and I know his favourite word is reset, he needs some kind of re-evaluation of what he's actually doing right now, rather than saying further and faster.
And you only need to look at America to see what happens when a populist does eventually gain power. It is chaos over there. Their economy has been completely hammered. I mean, he wiped $2 trillion off the global stock market. I don't think that is
stock markets have recovered in the past few weeks since his what was it?
The price of eggs hasn't gone down.
Independence Day. Yeah, no, the stock market recovers. Yeah, really. No one really knows what Trump intends. I don't think he knows yet. No. But that's all gonna. That's gonna. You know.
You have faith in Trump.
I won't. Let's not go into a Trump discussion right now.
8:51, big topics. But I think the other thing that just strikes me, the challenges for the two main parties, is the temptation is to...
But are they the two main, you know,
well, the traditional two main parties, the temptation is to attack the party opposite you or the politicians opposite you.
Yeah.
But by doing that, they also attack the voters that voted for them. And if you are Labour, if you are the Conservatives, if you so wish to draw in people either from the Greens, the Lib Dems or from Reform, you've got to be very careful about the attack messaging you put out against that party because you're going to potentially further drive those people away from you rather than bring them back in again.
Yeah.
It's something that's, talking actually about language, it's picked up today, isn't it, in the...
across the papers, across the papers, especially in the Telegraph. So this was following the Lucy Powell incident. She's the leader of the House of Commons, obviously. In Any Questions last week, when she referred to the grooming gangs, responding to a question, I think, was Tim Montgomery. And she referred to the grooming gang scandal as, a little trumpet, sort of dog whistle issue, which has got people extremely angry there's been calls for her to resign from the Conservatives, and now, as well, there's been calls from rape survivors, from abuse victims, saying, you know, the grooming gang scandal is not a dog whistle, it's not just a little trumpet.
And she has apologised profusely, and I agree it was a terrible use of language. And I mean, we are always trying to... You're on telly, right? And you say anything and it can get
really
absolutely
careful.
landed on you.
So
Very careful. But in the same week that Lee Anderson stood up in the Houses of Parliament and said to Jess Phillips, who has worked with domestic abuse survivors, you know, been in their homes, helping them get to court, and said, are you, you know, perhaps you're part of a cover-up, which you know, so that was absolutely unspeakably out of order.
Yeah, I mean, I think that Lucy Powell obviously regrets. She's made an apology,
deeply.
regrets what she said. But I think people do feel that there hasn't been enough of a response potentially from the government, which is why this has kind of, you know, fueled that anger. Because we've seen the Channel 4 programme, we've seen lots of coverage, a bit more coverage finally, which is very much needed of this scandal that was not properly investigated for so many years.
Yeah.
It's being reported that Downing Street accepts the apology and is giving their backing to Lucy Powell, which often then is the death knell, isn't it? Do we think that it will be survivable?
I don't know. I think it's... the next 24 hours will be crucial, won't they? Wes Streeting has come out today and is saying that he does, you know, that he sees that she was sorry and that he's giving her his full support.
I think what she was trying to say was, don't use it as a political football.
I think people know what...
And that's what I was trying to say, is like, on either side, it shouldn't be. It's such a grave, horrible travesty, and, yeah.
Let's just talk a little bit, shall we? Let's just go across the pond. We've focusing on the Financial Times. Chinese exporters plot paths to third countries to dodge Trump tariffs.
Yes.
Which, you know, we've seen Russian oil going and being refined in third countries and then being bought by countries that have embargoed Russia. So it's... I know the situation is different, but you can kind of see how there's always ways around these situations.
Exactly. And this whole thing between Trump and China, and it's like China have not blinked. And... at one point, they were talking in beautiful Mandarin, very poetic language, about how they were very used to tempests and that they were this big river, and essentially implying that, you know, like, they don't care. And so they are finding ways around this, and it would be things like getting their goods to other countries and then changing the origin washing, changing the label so it says made in, and then importing it into the USA. I mean, it's got so out of hand. At one point, I think Trump put something like over 2,000% tariff on Chinese solar panels or something. I mean, like, where does it end? And then this idea that Amazon were going to put the cost of tariffs on their goods, and you've got things like clothing outlets that millions of Americans use, like quite cheap ones like Temu and so on and so forth, and the price going up. And then, of course, he's absolutely vetoed that take. And it's like, oh, why don't you want that shown? Yes, because you're passing on costs to the US population, which is not what they voted for.
But I think the whole world, we're schizophrenic about our relationship with China, aren't we? We say, you know, look at us. We say that we're going to be strong with Beijing, but with Rachel Reeves has been over there, David Lammy's been over there. We've got phones and potentially electric vehicles that are potentially Chinese spy vehicles, but we're all hooked on cheap Chinese labour, cheap Chinese products, Amazon, AliExpress, Temu, you know, you name it. We've outsourced the whole thing. So China are in a strong position, aren't they?
And no one in a position of power that I can think of in recent weeks or months has said the words Xinjiang or Uyghur or all that situation at all. You know, like you say, it's such a conflicted and contrasted relationship between the West and China. We only have 10 seconds, so I'm going to thank you both so much for coming in on Bank Holiday Monday. Wish you all the best for the rest of your days as well. And remind you that there's plenty more stories to come here on Breakfast and online and the app. Thanks for watching.
A show of military might and menace.